Well, hello out there. It's T.M. Brown again, and welcome to our next reading from my first book, A Life Not My Own. I'm so excited that you all continue to join me on this journey. As you know, my intent is to share more with you than you'd experience if you read my story on your own. You may decide that you'd like to read along with me, and again, I think that would be extremely cool. So feel free to grab yourself one of my books at my website, www.authortmbrown.com. We started with the very first page, and I plan to work through the entire book. We will start today's reading on page 17. It's part of Early Days. I'll read the rest of this chapter and into the next chapter. Are you ready? For me, it has taken a lot of effort to break old thought patterns in order to find comfort within myself. My childhood was one of secrecy. The lesson? You must appear normal to everyone, your teachers, family members, and friends. You must take responsibility for everything and everyone around you. You must protect your brother. You are the oldest, and this is your responsibility. You must never appear as you really are, hungry, scared, and unloved. Ironically, a lot of what I was taught when I was a young child has given me an insight on life that I see now as an advantage. Many of us take life for granted. Most children grow up in an environment where love is freely given to them. They go through life thinking that a parent's love is without question, unconditional. If you're following my words, you know now that this is not always the case. It should be, but it is not. When a child is not the priority in a parent's life, and the parent makes it known, it is hard for that child to believe that they will ever be loved. For if not by a parent, then by whom? If your own mother will leave you, how can you be secure with anyone else? Do not assume that your children know that you love them without telling them so. Do not assume that your children know how proud you are of their accomplishments if you never express your feelings to them. Do not assume that they understand that you are tired after a long day at work and just need a few moments of silence. Talk to your children. Ensure that they understand that they are your priority and not a chore. Kiss them, hold them. They are never too old for affection. These are the lessons that I have learned as a result of my past. I believe that at an early age, I learned the importance of independence and responsibility. My mother wasn't there for me, so I had to do things on my own. I found out very quickly that I could do just that. Maybe not as well as I should have, or maybe not as well as she expected me to, but I found out that there was much that I could do. I have kept the memories of my past and find myself revisiting the inner strength throughout my life when events present themselves which seem impossible to manage. If there was a reason for my childhood, I believe that it was to teach me to recognize my inner strength, that God was with me and kept my brother and me safe through it all. God could have intervened whenever he wanted to. There are probably some of you saying, so why didn't he? My question to you would be, would I be the person I am today if he had? So that concludes the chapter that we've been reading for the last 2 episodes, and now we're going into the chapter called Ma. That's what we called her, Ma. She and my grandfather, Frank, finally rescued us. I don't remember the circumstances that led to the conclusion of Mac and I living with Betty, but it was definitely a dream come true. The move was totally unexpected. I don't remember anyone ever discussing it with us. I don't even remember saying goodbye to Betty. When I try to recall the events that brought about the move, all I find is a blank space. I will refer to this time living with Ma and not as living with my grandparents, because Ma was definitely running things. When she and Frank argued, Ma would ask him to leave. I interpreted this action as a confirmation of the fact that the house belonged to Ma and that Frank lived with her. Frank was the breadwinner, but not the one in charge. He and Grandma and my grandmother never married. As a child, I thought that was a little strange, especially given the fact that they lived together for more than 27 years. Ma never worked outside the house after we arrived. Therefore, she was always there for us. Ma had a really strong personality, but she wasn't mean. And let me tell you, my grandmother is in her 90s now, and her personality is just the same as it's always been, but never mean. If we misbehaved, we would know about it. This sometimes involved yelling, but never beatings. Yes, we were spanked when we needed it, but never beaten. The adjustment to living with Ma and Frank was not difficult at all for me. For Mac, it was different. He was used to living with Betty, who let him do basically whatever he wanted. Now he found himself unable to do that. Now we were both treated the same. He was held accountable for his actions and was not excused when he misbehaved. Another person appeared as well, my sister Sharon. I don't remember her at all prior to living with Ma. She was still a baby when they rescued us. She was really cute and had lots of curly black hair. She had the prettiest little brown face that I had ever seen. I loved her immediately and could not believe that I had a baby sister. I don't know where she lived prior to this time. Over the years, I fill in the blanks by telling myself that she was so cute and so small that Betty convinced someone to care for her. There was so much that I wanted to tell Ma about the life we had with Betty, but this was a topic that was never really allowed. As a child, I didn't understand why. I thought that since they rescued us, we were safe to tell the secrets that we had lived for years. Ma, you cook real good. Everything is so clean. I like it here. Thanks, little Tina. Your mother is a good cook, too. Betty didn't cook a lot for us. She wasn't home a lot. What do you mean? I didn't want to say any more. I could tell she was becoming upset with me. Everything was going so well with Ma. I didn't want her to be mad at me. Tina, what do you mean? Go ahead. You can tell me. Ma, Betty didn't cook for us. She left us at home and we had to eat what we could find. One day the lady across the street caught us eating out of the trash can and... Tina, you shouldn't say things like that. You know that ain't true. Ma, yes it is. I never heard nothing about that before. I don't believe it. That was the last time I ever made an attempt to talk to Ma about what it was like to live with Betty. We didn't have another conversation about this until I was grown. Ma had rescued us. Therefore, I assumed that I could tell her about what we had been through. As a child, I didn't know that the truth isn't always wanted. I didn't realize that although Betty was my mother, I was talking about Ma's daughter. She may have felt that Mac and I needed to be rescued, but talking about our life with her was something that Ma, I guess she wasn't prepared to hear. Many years would pass before the subject of living with Betty would come up again. Mac, Sharon, and I were very lucky to have Ma and Frank. We were treated in the manner that I believe they would have treated their own children. Ma and Frank never had any children together. To me, growing up in Ma's house was great as a child, average as a teenager, and difficult as an adult. As children, we wanted for very little. Frank was a large man, therefore food was plentiful. He was a blue-collar worker and was blessed with never being out of work. He had no specialized skills and would take whatever work was available. He held positions such as security guard, factory worker, truck loader, etc. He was considered honest, hard-working, and a family man by most people. To me, he had only two faults: drinking and smoking. On Fridays, Frank would receive his paycheck and bring it home to Ma. Together with Ma, we would go to the bank, cash the check, pay bills, buy food, and lastly, stop at the liquor store. The house rules were quite clear. Monday through Friday afternoons was for going to work and school. Friday nights, Saturday and Sundays were party days. Friends and family were always welcome on those days. In our house, it was unheard of to be without food and drink to offer guests. Mac, Sharon, and I were never allowed downstairs during adult visits. On these occasions, we were sent outside or to our rooms to play. Sometimes we would sneak downstairs to catch a peek at what the adults were doing. They were laughing and dancing and singing. Sometimes they sang the same song over and over again. 6, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. That's my number. Oh, get it. Oh, shit. Do it, girl. During the summer months, the guests would bring their kids with them when they came to visit. We were allowed to play outside late into the night. We weren't allowed to have, quote unquote, company upstairs and hardly ever had overnight guests. Ma made homemade locks on our bedroom doors. It was literally a wooden block that was nailed to the door frame. The nail was loose enough to allow the lock to be turned in such a way to hinder entrance into Mac's room or the room that Sharon and I shared. When it was time for us to retire for the night, Ma would make sure she reminded us to lock our doors. She was very protective of us. There was never a time when Mac, Sharon, and I awoke and Ma was not in the kitchen making breakfast. Our breakfast usually consists of various combinations of homemade pancakes, sausage, bacon, saltfish, scrapple, eggs, grits, fried potatoes, milk, and juice. Ma considered herself to be a country cook. Just like the nice lady in the window, Ma's kitchen was bright and clean. She seemed very comfortable in her small kitchen. She cleaned her pots and pans as she prepared the food. She would brag and say this was a signature of a good cook. There was nothing fancy about Ma's meals, but they were well balanced and plentiful. She hardly ever placed the food on serving plates except on holidays such as Easter, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. Most of the time, we would sit at the kitchen table where Ma would serve us from the pans that she cooked in. Ma did all the housekeeping except for making our beds. The only requirement that she placed on us was to make our beds prior to having breakfast in the morning. She never seemed tired or upset about any household responsibilities that she had. She placed a lot of pride in her housekeeping. It ain't clean if it don't smell clean. They just nasty. Look at them sheets on that line. Now you know, she know a little bleach can get them just as white as they was the day she bought them. We might not have much, but it's clean. Every once in a while,